I sold my apartment and signed the 256K sale papers with my family beside me. The next morning, the bank asked me to come in quietly. There was a detail in my file. They said I needed to see for myself. I need to tell you something first before I get into what happened at the bank, because the bank is not actually where the story starts. The story starts 3 years before that morning. It starts in a parking lot at 7 in the morning, before my shift, sitting in a car that smelled like fast food wrappers and old coffee, reading a lease I could barely afford and deciding to sign it anyway. It starts with a second job on weekends. It starts with saying no to trips, no to dinners, no to things that cost money I did not have yet. It starts with a spreadsheet I kept on my phone that I updated every single week, watching one number go up and one number go down for 3 years straight, until the morning I walked into a real estate office and put down a deposit on a one-bedroom apartment that was entirely, completely, 100% mine. No cosigner, no family loan, no strings, just mine. The apartment was not big. The kitchen was narrow, and the closet in the bedroom was the kind you had to stand sideways in. The building was older, and the elevator took too long, and in the summer, the air conditioning unit in the living room made a noise that sounded like a dog that had just been startled awake. But the light in the mornings was unreal. It came through the east-facing window and hit the kitchen counter in a way that made everything look golden, and I used to sit there before work with my coffee and feel like I had done something that actually mattered. I had built something that no one could take from me. That is what I believed. My family did not share that view. My mother's relationship with money had always been complicated in a way that was hard to explain to people who hadn't grown up inside it. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't careless. She just didn't believe in separation. In her mind, money inside the family was always family money. Her money was available to her children when they needed it. Her children's money was available to her and to each other when the situation called for it. She called it being close. She called it real love. She called it what families do. I had spent years watching that philosophy play out in ways that left certain people in the family quietly resentful and certain people quietly very comfortable, and the line between those two groups never seemed random to me. My brother had borrowed from my mother 6 times in 8 years. I knew the number because she had mentioned it more than once. Not as a complaint, but as a point of pride. He always paid her back, she said. He was responsible. What she meant was that he had the kind of personality that made repayment feel like a gift rather than an obligation, and my mother was the kind of person who responded to that. My sister was different. She was the emotional center of gravity in the family. When she cried, the room changed. When she was happy, everyone felt permission to relax. She had been married for 4 years to a man who worked in insurance, and they lived in a house 30 minutes from my mother and showed up to every holiday dinner, and generally represented the version of our family that looked correct from the outside. And then there was me. I was the one who had moved out first, the one who had taken the apartment, the one who had built the spreadsheet and worked the second job and said no to the dinners. My mother loved me. I know she did. But I think she also found me slightly exhausting. I wanted things to be clear. I wanted agreements written down. I wanted to know what was mine and what wasn't and where the line was. In a family that ran on emotional currency and unspoken obligation, that kind of thinking made me feel like a problem to be managed rather than a person to be understood. So when they started talking about the sale, I should have seen it more clearly than I did. It started at Easter dinner, about 8 months before I actually listed the apartment. My brother mentioned casually, almost as a footnote to something else he was saying, that the market was really strong right now for one-bedrooms in my area. My mother agreed. My sister said she had seen something about it on the news. It was light, conversational, nothing I could point to and say that was the beginning of a plan, but it was the beginning of a plan. Over the next few months, the conversation evolved in small increments. My brother started sending me listings in the suburbs. My mother started asking questions about my commute, my neighbors, the noise, the elevator that took too long. My sister started making comments about how much more space I could have somewhere else for the same price, how it would be nice to live closer to family, how I seemed tired lately, and maybe a change would help. None of it felt like pressure. Each piece by itself felt like concern, like people who loved me wanting better things for me. What I did not understand at the time was that it was coordinated. I don't mean they had meetings about it. I don't mean there were strategy sessions. I mean that in the quiet way that families sometimes move toward a shared goal without ever naming it out loud, everyone was nudging me in the same direction, and no one was asking me what direction I actually wanted to go. By midsummer, the idea of selling had shifted from something other people thought I should do to something I was considering. By fall, I had spoken to a real estate agent. By December, the apartment was listed. The offer came in January, $256,000. It was more than I had paid. It was a number that looked significant on paper. My family reacted to it like it was a lottery win. My mother cried. My brother hugged me. My sister said this was the beginning of something better, and I believed her because I wanted to believe her. Because it is very easy to believe the people who are hugging you and crying happy tears and telling you everything is about to be wonderful. The closing was on a Tuesday morning in late February. The lawyer's office was in a glass building downtown. Neutral carpet, a long table with too many chairs. Everyone dressed up more than the occasion required. My mother wore her good coat. My brother had his hair combed back in a way I had not seen in years. My sister had her camera out and kept saying she wanted to get a good photo of the moment I signed. She got several. I signed my name in 7 different places that morning, and each time someone said something encouraging. My mother squeezed my hand between signatures. My brother said I was making the right call. My lawyer, a quiet man named Gerald who had done real estate closings for 20 years and had the practiced calm of someone who had seen everything, asked me twice if I had read the full document, and both times I said yes when what I meant was mostly. By noon it was done. The funds would settle by end of day. I would have $256,000 in my checking account by midnight. We went back to my apartment after, the one that was no longer technically mine, but that still had my furniture and my coffee maker and my east-facing window with the light that came in golden in the mornings. My brother brought champagne that he had apparently already bought in anticipation, which I remember thinking was either sweet or presumptuous, but I was too tired and too emotionally wrung out to decide which. We stood in my kitchen and drank and talked about what came next. My mother had opinions about where I should look for a new place. My brother had opinions about investment strategy. My sister had opinions about how close to family I should try to be when I relocated. I remember sitting on the kitchen counter the way I used to when I was a kid and watching all 3 of them talk and thinking that I should feel lighter right now, that I should feel the way they were clearly feeling, which was excited and certain and satisfied. I remember thinking that the feeling of relief I had been promised would arrive soon, and I just needed to wait for it. It did not arrive. What arrived instead was a strange, hollow feeling that I kept trying to name and couldn't. I had just signed away the thing I had built, and every person I was closest to was in that room celebrating. My phone was on the kitchen counter beside me. I remember that too. I remember it because I had it out to take a photo of my brother pouring the second round of champagne, and then I set it down and got caught up in the conversation. And at some point, I moved to the other side of the room, and my phone stayed where it was. I did not think about that until later. We were there for about 2 hours. By 4 in the afternoon, everyone had drifted out with hugs and promises to talk soon and calls to make. My mother was the last to leave. She held my face in her hands the way she used to when I was very small and said she was proud of me. I told her I loved her. She left. I stood alone in the apartment for a long time after that. I ate leftover Chinese food at 9 at night sitting on the floor because the dining table had already been sold with the unit as part of the closing agreement. I watched something on my laptop that I cannot now remember. I checked my bank account at 11:40 p.m. and the full amount was there. $256,000. Clean and present and real. I went to sleep. At 9:17 the next morning, my phone rang from a number I did not recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. I had been getting a lot of spam calls that week, and I was tired, and the apartment looked different in the morning without the dining table, and I was not ready to talk to anyone. But something made me answer. I still don't know exactly what. Some instinct I cannot fully explain. Is this Ms. Hayes? The voice was measured, male, mid-40s maybe, the kind of voice that did not rush. Yes, I said. Who is this? My name is Marcus Webb. I'm a senior banking specialist at your branch of First National. I apologize for calling early. I need to ask you to come in this morning if you're able. There's something in your file I'd like you to see in person. I sat up. Is there a problem with the deposit? A brief pause. The deposit processed correctly. This is about something that appeared in conjunction with it. I'd rather walk you through it here. I want you to be able to see the documentation directly. I asked if he could tell me anything over the phone. He said he would rather not. That was the phrase that stuck. Not that he couldn't, that he would rather not. There is a difference between those two things, and I felt that difference in the base of my stomach. Can I bring someone? I asked. Of course, he said. I called my best friend immediately after I hung up. Her name is Renata, and we had been close since college, which meant she was not part of my family and had no stake in anything I was about to find out, and could therefore be trusted completely. She picked up on the second ring, listened to me explain in very compressed and slightly panicked terms what had just happened, and said she would meet me there. The drive downtown took 22 minutes. I counted traffic lights without meaning to. I counted because it kept my brain occupied enough that I couldn't spiral. There were 11 red lights and 3 yellow ones I probably should have stopped at. Renata was already waiting near the entrance when I pulled in. She had brought 2 coffees from the place down the street. She handed me one without saying anything. We went inside together. The First National branch on Meridian Street was not the closest branch to my apartment. It was the one I had originally opened my account at 6 years ago, when I had just moved to the city and needed something walking distance for my first job. I had never switched because I never had a a reason to. I knew the layout, the neutral carpet, the row of glass front offices along the left wall, the coffee station near the window that always smelled a little overbrewed. A woman at the front desk walked us back without us having to explain much. Marcus Webb was already in the second office from the end, the door half open, standing when we came in. He was younger than I had imagined from his voice. Early 40s maybe. Dark suit, no tie. The kind of neat that is not trying to impress you, but is not going to apologize for itself either. He shook my hand, shook Renata's, gestured to the two chairs across from his desk, and closed the door behind us with a careful, deliberate click. He sat down. He had a file folder on the desk in front of him. It was thicker than I expected. Tabbed, organized. The kind of file that takes more than an hour to put together. "Thank you for coming in quickly," he said. "Before I show you anything, I want to ask you something directly. Did you make any changes to your account settings last night? Any transfers, any beneficiary updates, anything at all?" "No," I said. "I checked the balance. That's it." He nodded. He had the look of someone who was confirming something rather than learning something. "Did you share your login credentials with anyone recently? A family member, a financial advisor, anyone?" "No." Another nod. Renata sat beside me with her coffee in her hands and did not say anything, which was exactly what I needed her to do. Marcus opened the folder and removed a single sheet of paper, turned it around, and slid it across the desk toward me. It was a transfer authorization form, the kind the bank used for wire transfers. My name was at the top, my account number. The date was yesterday, 11:52 p.m., 16 minutes before midnight. 16 minutes after I had checked my balance and seen the full amount and gone to sleep. The destination account was a string of numbers I did not recognize. The bank's automated monitoring system flagged this transfer before it processed, Marcus said. It was flagged because the full amount of a same-day large deposit being redirected to an external account within 24 hours triggers a secondary review protocol. The transfer was paused pending human review, which is why I called you this morning. I was looking at the dollar amount on the form, $256,000, every single dollar. "I didn't do this," I said. "I know," Marcus said. "How do you know?" He removed a second document. It was a login activity report, my account, a full log of every device, every IP address, every session, going back 30 days. He pointed to a highlighted line. Yesterday, 11:49 p.m., my home IP address, my phone, a session that lasted exactly 4 minutes and 31 seconds. "This is consistent with the login you described," he said, checking the balance. Then he pointed to the next highlighted line. 1 hour and 12 minutes later, 1 in the morning, a different device, a different IP address, but the same account, the same session token sequence that suggested the device had been previously authorized on my account. "This second login," Marcus said carefully, "originated from a device that your account recognized, which means at some point, that device was logged into your account with your credentials, and your account added it as a trusted device. This could have happened days ago, weeks ago, or it could have happened last night." I heard what he was saying, but it took a moment to fully land. "Someone had already accessed my account from their device," I said slowly, "before last night." "That is one possibility," Marcus said. "Another possibility is that your credentials were used on a new device last night and successfully authenticated. Either way, the session that submitted this transfer is not the session from your phone." Renata put down her coffee. I stared at the IP address on the log. I did not know enough about IP addresses to read it the way Marcus could, but he anticipated that. "The second login is a residential IP address," he said. "Not a VPN, not a public network, someone's home internet connection." He paused. "We don't have the ability to identify whose address it is without a law enforcement request, but the timestamp and device fingerprint give us a clear picture of the sequence of events." I asked him to walk me through the sequence. He did. At 11:49 p.m., I logged into my account from my phone at my home address. I checked the balance. I logged out. 4 minutes, 31 seconds. At 1:03 a.m., a separate device logged into my account from a separate location. The session lasted 11 minutes. During those 11 minutes, the transfer authorization form was completed and submitted, full amount, to an external account. At 1:14 a.m., the session ended. At 1:16 a.m., the bank's monitoring system flagged the transfer for review. At 8:50 a.m., Marcus Webb reviewed the flag, confirmed the anomaly, and called me. The money had been sitting in a holding state since 1:16 in the morning, 2 minutes after the person who was not me had finished and logged out, probably thinking the transfer had gone through. "They don't know it was stopped," I said. Marcus nodded once. Renata said very quietly, "Oh my God." I sat with that for a moment. 2 minutes. 2 minutes between the transfer being submitted and the bank catching it. If the monitoring system had been slightly slower, or if the threshold had been slightly higher, or if Marcus Webb had been on vacation that week and the flag had sat in a queue until someone else got to it, I would have woken up that morning with an empty account and no idea how it happened. I thought about my family in my kitchen the night before. The champagne, the hugging, the 2 hours of celebration, my phone on the counter. "Marcus," I said, "the destination account. Do you know anything about it? He hesitated in a way that told me he knew more than he was sure he should say. The account is registered at First National, he said carefully. I can't give you the account holder's name, but I can tell you that the account is not newly created. It has a transaction history. How long has it existed? At least 2 years. I thought about that. Whoever had done this had not set up a throwaway account the night of my sale. They had an existing account, an established account, which meant this was not something they decided to do in a moment of opportunity. This had been planned in advance, or at least the infrastructure for it had been in place long before last night. Marcus said he strongly recommended I file a report with the bank's fraud department that morning, and strongly recommended I also contact local law enforcement. He said the bank would cooperate fully with any investigation. He said the transfer was currently still in the paused state and would remain so until the matter was resolved. He said the money was safe. I nodded. I heard that. I heard him say the money was safe. But what I was thinking about was not the money. I was thinking about who had been in my apartment the night before. I was thinking about my phone on the counter. I was thinking about 4 people who had access to that counter, to that room, to the hours when I was distracted and emotional and not paying attention the way I should have been. My mother, my brother, my sister, and my brother's girlfriend, who I had not even mentioned yet, because she had seemed like such a peripheral presence that night, quiet in the corner with her phone, barely saying anything, and I had not thought about her once since she left. Her name was Dana. I had met Dana exactly 4 times. She had been with my brother for about a year and a half. She was pretty in a quiet way, always polite, always slightly removed from the center of whatever was happening. My mother liked her, which was not nothing. My brother was happier with her than I had seen him in years. I had never had a single reason to think about Dana in any context that was not completely ordinary, until Renata said, on the drive back from the bank, the thing that changed the shape of everything. Your brother's girlfriend, Renata said. She was sitting next to your phone for like 45 minutes. I had been staring out the window. I turned to look at her. I noticed it because I was in the kitchen getting more champagne, Renata said. She was sitting on that stool at the counter, right next to where you'd left your phone. She was on her own phone for most of it, but at one point she put her phone down and I saw her look at yours. She picked it up? I don't know. I turned around to pour. When I looked back, she was on her own phone again. Renata paused. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Your phone was just sitting there. But now it's different, I said. We sat in silence for a moment. I ran through what I knew about Dana. She was in finance. I remembered my brother mentioning that once, proudly, like it was a credential. She worked at some kind of financial services firm. She would know exactly how to navigate a bank's wire transfer portal. She would know what information she needed. She would know how to do it quickly and cleanly and without leaving the kind of obvious evidence that someone without that background might leave. I thought about my banking app and how it was set up. I thought about whether I had ever handed my phone to someone to show them something and trusted them not to look at the rest. I thought about whether there was a way to add a trusted device to my account that someone else could have triggered without me knowing. I thought about how long it would take to do that. Less than 4 minutes, probably. 4 minutes was the length of the session I had on my phone at 11:49 p.m. What I did in those 4 minutes was check the balance. What someone else could have done in that same window was something I was only beginning to understand. When I got back to my apartment, I sat down at my kitchen table that was no longer there and remembered too late that I had sold it with the unit and ended up sitting on the floor against the cabinets. Renata sat beside me. I opened my banking app and looked at my account settings for the first time in a long time. There was a section called Trusted Devices. I had 2 on the list. One was my phone. The other was listed as an authorized device added 11 days ago. 11 days ago. 11 days before the closing. 11 days before anyone would have known the exact dollar amount of the sale proceeds. Except that 11 days before closing, I had been at my mother's house for Sunday dinner, and my phone had spent 2 hours sitting on her kitchen table while I helped with dishes and talked in the living room and did not think about it once. And Dana had been there too. I want to stop here and explain something about my brother before I tell you what happened next. His name is Derek, and he is 2 years older than me, and I have loved him my whole life in the specific, complicated way that you love someone who has been in every single memory you have. He taught me to ride a bike in the parking lot behind our church. He drove me to my first job interview and waited in the car for 45 minutes. When I was 22 and had my heart broken for the first time in a way that felt unsurvivable, he showed up at my apartment with takeout and bad movies and stayed until I stopped crying, which took most of the night. I am telling you this because I need you to understand that what I am about to tell you about Derek did not come from a place of suspicion or resentment. It came from evidence. And I need you to understand that because of what the evidence eventually showed. I did not go to Derek first. The first thing I did after I found the trusted device entry in my account settings was take a screenshot. Then I took a second screenshot. Then I went back to the main account page and screenshotted the login history. Then I sent all of it to my own email. Then I sent it to Renata's email too, because I had seen enough situations spiraling in my life to know that documents have a way of disappearing when people find out you have them. Renata suggested we call a lawyer before we did anything else. I did not have a personal lawyer. My real estate closing had gone through Gerald, the quiet man in the too quiet office, and he was a real estate attorney, not the kind you called about financial fraud. But Renata had a cousin who did civil litigation and criminal defense. She called him from my kitchen floor and put him on speaker. His name was Anthony. He had a direct, unhurried way of asking questions that made me trust him immediately. I walked him through everything: the bank call, Marcus and the file, the transfer authorization, the login history, the trusted device, the Sunday dinner 11 days ago, Dana sitting at the counter with my phone. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Don't contact your brother yet. Don't contact the girlfriend. Don't contact your mother, your sister, anyone in the family until you filed the police report and until I've had a chance to look at the screenshots you sent me. Can you do that?" I said yes. He said, "The bank's fraud case and a potential criminal filing are two separate tracks. The bank is already moving. You want to make sure you don't do anything that could complicate the criminal side. If you confront someone before law enforcement is involved and they delete evidence, that's a problem. If you give anyone a heads up that you know, they can coordinate their story. So right now, the most important thing is to stay quiet." I said I understood. He said, "One more thing. Do you know anything about your brother's financial situation right now?" I thought about it. Over the past year, Derek had made a few comments I had not paid much attention to at the time. He had mentioned that work was slow. He had mentioned something about a deal falling through. He worked in commercial real estate, which had been volatile, and I had taken his comments as the standard low-grade complaints that people in volatile industries make when things weren't going perfectly. But I thought about those comments more carefully now. 6 months ago at Thanksgiving, he had said something to me that I had completely forgotten until this moment. We were washing dishes after dinner, just the two of us, and he had said, "I'm glad you're selling, by the way. That's a smart call. The market's not going to hold forever." He had said it casually, like an observation. I had said thanks. The conversation moved on. He had been glad I was selling, before I had even made the decision. I sat with that for a long time. The next 48 hours were the strangest of my life. I went through the motions of being a person in a normal situation. I ate meals. I answered work emails. I made an appointment with a detective at the local precinct for Thursday morning. I talked to Anthony 3 more times. I did not call my mother. I did not text my brother. I checked my phone compulsively for messages from either of them and found regular ones, the kind that meant nothing had changed on their end. They had no idea anything was happening. My brother texted me Tuesday evening. "Hey, you doing okay? Big adjustment this week, I bet. Let me know if you need anything." I read it 4 times. I typed and deleted 3 different responses. I settled on, "I'm okay, just settling in. Talk soon." He sent back a thumbs up emoji. I stared at that emoji for longer than I want to admit. Wednesday, I met Renata for coffee and she told me something she had been hesitant to share until she was sure it was relevant. About 3 weeks ago, she had run into Dana at a grocery store. They had talked for maybe 5 minutes. Small talk. And at some point, Renata had mentioned, because my apartment sale had just been listed and it came up naturally, that I was getting ready to close on the sale and that it looked like it was going to go well. She had told Dana the sale was going well 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks before my phone went unattended at my mother's Sunday dinner. I asked Renata if she had told Dana the approximate amount. Renata closed her eyes for a moment. She asked how much you were selling for. I thought she was just being conversational. I said I didn't know exactly, but I knew the list price. The list price had been $260,000. The final sale had come in at $256, close enough that someone who knew the list price would know the approximate amount they were working with. Renata said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I had no reason to think." "Stop," I said. "You have nothing to apologize for. This isn't on you." She looked like she didn't fully believe me, which I understood. Thursday morning, I went to the precinct with Anthony present by phone. The detective assigned to the case was a woman named Sergeant Pauline Torres. She was efficient and thorough and took notes by hand in a small spiral notebook that she kept directly in front of her. I gave her the screenshots. I gave her the timeline. I told her about the trusted device added 11 days before the closing. I told her about Dana at the Sunday dinner. I told her what Renata had said. Sergeant Torres asked me detailed questions about Dana. Full name, which I only knew as Dana Kessler. Place of work, which I only knew was a financial services company, and I thought it started with a V, but I wasn't certain. My brother's home address, which I gave her. How long they had been together. She asked me about my brother's financial situation directly. I told her what I knew, which was not much, but that I had noticed some comments over the past year that suggested things might not be going well. "Did he ever ask you for money?" she asked. I thought about it. No, not directly. "Did anyone in your family discuss the sale proceeds with you in terms of how they might be used?" I thought about the conversations over the past several months, my mother's vague comments about the money being an opportunity, my brother's remark about investment strategy at the celebration, my sister's, and then I remembered something. About 6 weeks before the closing, I had been on the phone with my mother. We had been talking about the timing of the sale, the moving logistics, the things there were to coordinate, and at some point she had said something that I had heard and processed as general family talk and moved on from. She had said, "Derek is going through a hard time. I want you to keep that in mind when everything settles." I had said, "Okay." She had said, "He's not asking for anything. I just want you to be aware." I had said said I appreciated her telling me. She had said, "Family takes care of family." I had agreed and changed the subject and not thought about it again until this moment. Sitting across from Sergeant Torres in a small interview room with a foam ceiling and fluorescent lights and Anthony's voice coming out of my phone speaker. She said, "Family takes care of family," I told the detective. Torres wrote something in her notebook. She did not react visibly. She had the practiced calm of someone who had heard versions of this story many times. Before the meeting ended, she said that the investigation would involve subpoenaing the destination account information from the bank, which required a court order but could move quickly given the active fraud flag. She said she would also need to look at my brother's financial records, which would take longer but were retrievable. She said I should expect this to take some time but that the early evidence was significant. I asked her honestly what she thought had happened. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "I think someone who needed money knew you were about to have a lot of it. I think they planned this more carefully than it might look on the surface. And I think you were very lucky that your bank caught it." I drove home. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building for 35 minutes before I went inside. I thought about Derek teaching me to ride a bike in the church parking lot. I thought about him sitting in the car for 45 minutes while I had my first interview. I thought about him staying until morning the night my heart broke. And I thought about him standing in my kitchen 2 nights ago, pouring champagne, saying I was making the right call. The subpoena on the destination account came back faster than Torres had predicted. She called me on a Friday afternoon, 9 days after our first meeting, and asked if I could come in that afternoon. I told her yes and drove straight there without calling anyone. The destination account belonged to Dana Kessler. It was a personal checking account. 2 years old, as Marcus had said. Consistent small deposits, consistent small withdrawals. Nothing unusual until about 8 months ago, when the deposits became irregular and the balance started running low. Over the past 6 months, the account had dipped below $100 3 separate times. Dana Kessler, the quiet woman in the corner with good manners and a career in finance, had been broke. Torres had more. A subpoena for Derek's financial records had revealed that he had a personal loan outstanding with a private lender, not a bank, a private lender, to the tune of $168,000. The loan had been taken out 14 months ago. It had a repayment schedule that he had fallen behind on. The private lender had sent him 2 formal notices of default in the past 3 months. $168,000. I stared at that number. I thought about everything I did not know about my brother's life. "He never told anyone in the family?" I asked. "Not as far as we can determine," Torres said. "His bank records don't show any incoming transfers from family members. No evidence anyone was helping him financially." She paused. "The private loan is from an LLC. We're still tracing the principals, but it doesn't look like anything connected to your family." I asked what the loan was for. Torres looked at her notes. "Business investment. Commercial real estate deal that went sideways about 2 years ago. He put up a significant personal stake. 2 years ago. About the same time Dana had been with him." I thought about that. I thought about how someone could be drowning in a debt that was suffocating them and still show up to every Sunday dinner and every holiday and every champagne celebration and never let anyone see it on their face. "What about Dana?" I asked. "That's where it gets more specific," Torres said. She turned a page. "Dana Kessler has a financial industry background. She worked at a firm for 6 years that specialized in wire transfers and international banking. She left that job 8 months ago, voluntarily according to her former employer." Torres looked at me steadily. "But 3 months before she left, there was an internal review at that firm involving an unauthorized account access incident. The review did not result in termination or charges. She resigned before the process concluded." I heard that very carefully. An unauthorized account access incident. Dana had done something like this before, or close enough to it, that her previous employer had opened an internal review. She had gotten out before it became official. And then she had landed in my brother's life, in my family's orbit, in my mother's kitchen on Sunday afternoons near my unattended phone. "Do you think my brother knew?" I asked. "About her history, I mean?" Torres was quiet for a moment. "I think that's a question you may get to ask him." She said they were preparing a warrant. I drove home and sat on my kitchen floor again. I had stopped being embarrassed about the floor. I had sold the couch too. Technically, it was leaving with the unit, and the replacement furniture wasn't being delivered until the following week. So the floor was where I sat when I needed to think. Renata came over that night. I told her everything Torres had told me. We sat on the floor together with takeout containers between us, and neither of us said much for a while. "You're going to have to tell your family," Renata finally said. "I know. Have you thought about when?" "I've thought about nothing else," I said. The question was not whether to tell them. The question was whether to tell them before or after the warrant was executed. Anthony had said to wait. If I told my mother before law enforcement moved, she might call Derek, and Derek might warn Dana, and evidence might be deleted, or accounts might be moved, or people might disappear in the way that people sometimes disappeared when they knew something was coming. I agreed with Anthony. I would wait, but waiting meant 4 more days of normal family text messages. 4 more days of my mother sending me photos of apartment listings in neighborhoods near hers and asking if I'd looked at any of them. 4 more days of Derek sending me business articles with no explanation, the way he always had, as if everything was ordinary. On the 3rd day, something happened that I had not anticipated. My sister called. She didn't text first, which she almost always did. She just called, midday on a Tuesday. And I almost did not answer, but I did. Her name is Claire, and she is 3 years younger than me, and in the family she was always the soft one, the crier, the one who wanted peace above almost everything else. She had never been unkind to me. She had never pushed me the way my mother did or manipulated the way I was starting to suspect my brother had. She was just Claire, gentle, a little fragile, always hoping things would be okay. "Can I ask you something?" she said. My whole body went still. "Sure. Is something wrong? You've been weird since the closing. I know you're adjusting. I know it's a big change, but you're not answering Mom's messages as fast as you usually do, and you seem, I don't know, off." I sat very quietly for a moment. "I'm okay," I said. "Just a lot to process." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." She was quiet for a moment. "Is it about Derek?" My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" I kept my voice as even as I could. Another pause. Longer this time. "He asked me not to say anything," she said, "so I'm not going to go into details. But I've been worried about him for a while. I think he's in trouble with something financial. He said he had a plan to fix it. He wouldn't tell me what the plan was." Her voice was careful and unhappy in a way I recognized from our whole lives. "I've been hoping whatever it wasn't, I don't know. I just hope he didn't do anything stupid." I pressed my hand flat against the wall behind me. Claire knew. Not everything. Not the shape of the plan. But she knew he was in trouble, and she knew he had said he had a way to fix it. And she had said nothing to anyone and hoped for the best. "Claire," I said, as calmly as I could, "did he tell you the plan involved me?" A very long pause. "Not specifically," she said. I think she understood in that moment that I knew more than she was saying. And I think she also understood what it meant that I was being this careful with my words. "Is the money okay?" she whispered. "The money is okay," I said. She made a sound that was not quite a breath and not quite a word. "Don't call Derek," I said. "Don't call Mom. Don't say anything to anyone until you hear from me. Can you do that?" "Yes," she said. She sounded small and scared and like our mother holding my face in her hands and telling me she was proud of me, and I could not think about any of that right now. "I'll call you when I know more," I said. "I promise." I hung up. Anthony called me an hour later to tell me the warrant had been executed that morning. Dana Kessler had been brought in for questioning. She had a lawyer with her before the second question. The full picture assembled itself over the following week in the way that these things do, piece by piece, each new fact shifting the shape of what I thought I understood. Dana had been questioned for 3 hours. She had not said much, but her silence and her lawyer's presence had been enough for Torres to move in other directions. The phone records came back first, then the emails, then the laptop forensics. Torres called me on a Thursday morning and asked if I was sitting down. I was on my kitchen floor again. I told her I was sitting down. "Dana Kessler and your brother were both involved," Torres said. "The device that was added to your account at your mother's Sunday dinner 11 days before the closing was Dana's phone. She accessed your account through your phone while it was unattended. She navigated to the trusted device settings and added her own device. The process took approximately 3 minutes. 3 minutes, the length of a song. She used your credentials," Torres continued. "Your saved login information, which was accessible because your phone was unlocked." She paused. "The night of the closing, after the celebration, Dana initiated the transfer from her home, using the access she had set up 11 days earlier. She submitted the full transfer, $256,000, to her own account. The expectation was that it would clear overnight and be available by morning." I asked about Derek. Torres's voice was measured. "Derek Hayes was aware of the plan. Our forensic review of his phone shows a text exchange with Dana going back approximately 4 months. The plan originated as a conversation about how to manage the private loan default. Dana proposed the scheme. Your brother agreed to it." A pause. "He also helped facilitate it. 2 weeks before the closing, he was the one who brought up the sale at Sunday dinner in a way that made it natural for everyone to be together at your mother's house. He coordinated the occasion. And on the night of the celebration, the champagne, the extended gathering, the way everyone stayed for 2 hours, that was not incidental. It was designed to give Dana time with your phone, the champagne. My brother had already bought the champagne before the closing. He knew they were going to need time. I asked about my mother. "No evidence your mother had any knowledge of the plan," Torres said. "Her communications show nothing relevant. She appears to have been genuinely celebrating." I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. It did not make anything better, but it made one specific thing slightly less terrible. "Derek is being charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud," Torres said. "Dana Kessler is being charged with wire fraud, unauthorized computer access, and identity theft." Both charges are federal, given the nature of the financial institution involved. Federal charges. I said the words back to myself very quietly. My brother was going to be charged with federal crimes. My brother who had waited in the car for 45 minutes. My brother who had stayed until morning. My brother who had poured champagne at my closing celebration, while his girlfriend was planning to empty my account before I woke up the next day. I thanked Torres. I hung up. I sat on my floor for a very long time. I called Anthony. I called Renata. Then I sat for another hour doing nothing, which felt necessary in a way I could not explain. Then I called my mother. She answered on the first ring, the way she always did when I called, which she had told me once was because I did not call often enough, and she was not going to miss it when I did. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. I heard the kitchen sounds behind her. Dishes, the coffee maker, the ordinary textures of her ordinary morning. "Mom," I said, "I need to come over. I need to tell you something about Derek." The kitchen sounds stopped. "What happened?" she said. "I'll explain when I get there. Can Claire come too?" A silence that lasted exactly as long as it needed to, before she said yes. Claire was already there when I arrived. She had driven over immediately after my mother called her, and she had the look of someone who had known something was coming for a long time and had been terrified of being right. My mother was at the kitchen table, hands around a coffee mug that I could see was almost certainly cold by now, and the expression on her face was one I had seen only a handful of times in my life. It was the face she made when something could not be made better. I sat down. I told them everything. I started with the bank call. I walked through every piece, every document, every conversation with Marcus and Torres and Anthony. I showed them the screenshots. I told them about the trusted device, about the Sunday dinner, about Dana's phone and 3 minutes and 11 days before the closing. I told them about Derek's private loan. I told them about $168,000 and a commercial real estate deal that had gone sideways 2 years ago. I told them about Dana's previous employer and the internal review she had walked away from. My mother did not say a word through any of it. She held her cold coffee with both hands and looked at the middle of the table, and her face was completely still in a way that I found harder to watch than crying would have been. Claire cried. She had her hand over her mouth before I finished the first 5 minutes, and by the end her shoulders were shaking and she kept saying she was sorry. She was so sorry. She should have said something sooner. She had known he was in trouble, and she had hoped, and she was sorry. I told her to stop apologizing. I told her she hadn't known what he was planning. Nobody knew what he was planning except him and Dana. My mother finally spoke. Her voice was very quiet and very flat. "He let us celebrate," she said. I didn't answer. "He stood there in your kitchen and poured champagne and let us celebrate," she said again. She stopped. She set down the coffee mug very carefully. She put both hands flat on the table. She looked at them. "I pushed you to sell that apartment," she said. "Mom, I pushed you." Her voice broke just slightly, then steadied. "I thought I was helping you. I thought it was the right thing. And he knew I would push you, and She stopped again. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. She turned her hand over and held mine. We sat like that for a long time. The three of us in my mother's kitchen with the coffee maker, and the dish sounds that had gone quiet, and the cold February light coming through the window. Eventually, my mother asked when Derek was going to be told. I said I didn't know exactly, that Torres and Anthony were handling the timing on that. My mother said very quietly, "Was the money recovered?" I said yes. The bank had held the transfer. The money was safe. She nodded slowly, like that was the one piece she needed to keep herself together. I stayed for 2 more hours. I stayed because leaving felt wrong, and because my mother looked like she should not be alone, and because Claire needed to hold on to something solid, and I was the only solid thing available. Before I left, my mother hugged me at the door in the specific way she had hugged me since I was small, one hand on the back of my head, her face pressed to my hair. She held on longer than usual. She said, "I'm sorry I pushed you to sell." I said, "You didn't know." She said, "I should have made sure you wanted to, not just that everyone else thought you should." I drove home. Derek found out the following morning. He called me from a number I didn't recognize, which meant he was calling from somewhere that was not his phone, which told me he already knew some of what was happening. I did not pick up. He left a voicemail that I have listened to exactly once and will probably never listen to again. He said he was sorry. He said he never meant for any of this to happen the way it happened. He said he thought Dana had a plan that would work out and that no one would be hurt and that he was going to pay me back every dollar. He said he loved me. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after the voicemail ended. Then I called Anthony and asked what I needed to do next. I have not spoken to my brother since. Dana Kessler was formally charged 6 weeks after the closing. Derek was charged 2 weeks after that. Anthony says the evidence is substantial, and the federal prosecutors are not known for being lenient on cases involving premeditated financial fraud against a family member. He says I may have to testify. I said I would do whatever was needed. My new apartment is on the 4th floor of a building with good light. The kitchen is bigger than my old one. The closet is actually functional. In the mornings, I make coffee and sit at a real table, one that belongs to me, that I bought with part of the $256,000 $100,000 that is still, despite everything, sitting in my account. The money that my brother tried to take. The money that my brother thought he needed more than I needed my trust in him. I have been sitting with something for the past several weeks that I do not fully know how to name. It is not anger exactly, though the anger was there first and was loud and real and entirely earned. It is not grief exactly, though there is grief in it. It is something more like the feeling of looking at a photograph of a place you loved and noticing for the first time, after years of looking at it, a detail in the background that changes everything you thought the picture was. My family was in that kitchen. My brother poured the champagne. My phone was on the counter. And I was the last one to understand what was happening in my own home. The thing about trust is that it doesn't break dramatically most of the time. It doesn't shatter like glass. It erodes, piece by piece, in 3-minute windows on a Sunday afternoon when you're in the other room thinking about nothing. And by the time you notice it's gone, someone has already walked out the door.